Brennan, the newcomer with an expensive watch and a sharp smile, pushed his plate so hard the porcelain seemed to protest against the old wood of the table. "This," he practically spat, "is what you call professional cooking? Mediocre? Amateurish. Inferior ingredients poorly disguised by excessive spices." Clara opened her mouth to reply, but his voice prevailed, louder. "Places like this are exactly the problem. Cheap small-town nostalgia. It should be demolished and replaced with something that actually justifies the investment." Clara's face burned as memories flooded her body. It was like being 19 again, hearing her father tell her mother that she would only hinder his future. It was like the phone call that ripped her from the Lion Culinary Academy in her 3rd year, just as she was about to specialize in haute cuisine, forcing her to give up her scholarship when her mother's cancer arrived. It was like every time life whispered that she would never be enough, neither a devoted enough daughter to abandon her dreams early, nor an ambitious enough chef to fight for hers when life demanded it. Tears threatened to break, but before they could fall, a deep voice pierced the room, dragging the silence. "You will apologize to Chef Bennett now, or you will leave this inn immediately. Choose." Clara looked up in surprise and saw standing there, distant yet unexpectedly close, a man with gray eyes, Marcus, someone who seemed to combine authority and gentleness in equal measure. Upon seeing Robert, the man who had humiliated her, turning pale and mumbling apologies before hurriedly leaving the table, Clara felt her heart race. Who was that stranger? Why protect someone she didn't know? What she could not have imagined was that, in less than a week, that man would rise up and break her heart in a way that no humiliation ever had, and that, in the inevitable encounter of mistakes, miracles, and forgiveness, both would be marked by more than just a simple Christmas season. Before we continue, a heartfelt request. Please subscribe to the channel. I would be very grateful for your support. Now, let's delve into this story of redemption and Christmas love. As the room gradually emptied, with whispers between sips of wine and averted glances, Clara collected plates and tried, unsuccessfully, to sweep away the dust of broken dreams, unaware that she was being observed under the same delicate beam of light that, for some, reveals sadness, and for others, foretells hope. The lingering aromas from the Pine Haven kitchen lingered through the early morning hours, recycling memories like leaves blown by an ancient wind. Among copper pots and ceramic vessels, Clara walked in a silent ritual, preparing, checking, turning off the lights in each room before going up to the tiny attic bedroom. It was in those moments, after everyone else was asleep, that loneliness whispered loudest. And in that whisper, Margaret Bennett, her mother, even in her absence, seemed to still dwell there. Clara's past wasn't just made up of tragedies, but of battles too small to fit into reference letters. Her mother sang in a tired voice, "Don't give up, daughter," even after 12 hours of cleaning rooms and preparing ornaments for the Christmas celebration. The earthy smell of the gardens that the little girl helped water, her hands full of mud, while Eleanor smiled from the balcony, a silent witness to the new beginning of a woman who had lost everything except her courage. That December, Pine Haven was a silent witness to an invisible battle. The once vibrant, detailed inn was now weary, chipped baseboards, worn carpets, windows with jammed latches. Eleanor walked through the lobby at night, adjusting garlands and avoiding the subject that hurt her most: the overdue bills, the dwindling balance, the lack of reservations for January. She saw Margaret in Clara's face, and loved the girl as if she were the daughter she never had. But love doesn't pay salaries, and keeping Clara even without money was her silent way of honoring an old promise to her friend. "Margaret, our friendship is forever. Take care of my girl if I'm ever not around." Outside, the city breathed unease. Curious onlookers wondered how the inn still survived. Shopkeepers whispered about offers from outside businessmen. The few guests felt in the air that mixture of welcome and desperate urgency. On that cold night after the commotion of dinner, Eleanor knocked softly on the kitchen door. "Daughter." The word slipped out effortlessly, and Clara felt the contained longing in that tone. "Tomorrow I'll talk to the plumber about the heater in room 8. If you need more eggs for the party cake, I can run to the market early." Clara responded only with a brief smile. There was an invisible tension between preservation and loss. Everything there was sustained by promises, sacrifices, and an almost childlike faith that miracles could still happen. And under the dim lights of the Christmas lanterns hanging on the porch, Marcus watched Clara's comings and goings and felt, without knowing how to name it, that house was less about walls, more about silent bonds. Through the window, he saw Clara pick up a forgotten blanket, sit for a moment on the stairs, and lose herself in the flow of her own breath. At that moment, Marcus felt something shift in his chest. The corporate certainty that he was there only for business was beginning to dissolve. The next morning, Clara entered the kitchen still sleepy, noticed the steaming cup resting near the stove and the folded paper beside it. She read the words twice, feeling something tighten in her chest, gratitude mixed with a tenderness she dared not name. The note was simple. There are things we protect even when we don't have the right. But sometimes protecting also means having the courage to change. She held the paper between her fingers and, taking a deep breath, decided to look for it. She found Marcus in the small hallway, sitting by the window overlooking the snow-covered garden, a mug of coffee in his hands, his gaze lost in the white landscape. She approached slowly. "Thank you," she began, looking directly at Marcus for the first time since the previous night. "Not for this coffee, though it's welcome, but for standing up for me. Rich and powerful men like Robert never understand the effect of words on other people's lives, always thinking they can run over anyone in their way. Respect, Marcus. Respect is all a weary heart desires after so long fighting." Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. Her vulnerability completely disarmed him. He wanted to say something, reveal who he really was, undo the weight that was beginning to hurt. But seeing her like this, so fragile and hopeful, he understood that confessing at that moment would be like taking away the already fragile ground on which she stood. He simply nodded, and in the shared silence, they both felt something change. Every December, the Pine Haven Inn's Christmas party was more than a tradition. It was the visible heart of a community that refused to be forgotten. Every December, Margaret Bennett transformed the inn into a sanctuary of hope. When she passed away, Clara inherited not just a recipe, but a sacred responsibility. The children's letters piled up in the small golden box on the inn's counter, each addressed to Santa Claus, each containing simple requests: a pair of gloves, used toys, a blanket for a younger sibling. The ritual was simple. Residents organized themselves, collected gifts, and distributed them on Christmas Eve, allowing each child to feel seen and celebrated. Keeping the promise made to her mother, Clara went to great lengths to ensure the tradition continued. Many of the adults who now helped were once children who received their first gifts there. Year after year, the inn became the heart of Pine Haven. Golden lights, soft music, laughter, and the certainty that at least one night a year, the impossible became real. But that December was different. The snow fell harder than he could ever remember. The wind whipped at blinds, forming heavy blankets against doors and windows, turning the city into an island isolated from the outside world. For Marcus, it was a complication. He had planned to leave on Sunday, after his initial field study. Flights canceled, roads closed, his plans were swallowed up by the unexpected blizzard. The executive with the relentless schedule found himself trapped in a small town, where time was measured not by digital clocks, but by the communal rhythm of keeping everyone warm and together. Marcus, isolated from New York and his offices, felt a different kind of anxiety vibrate within him, and a disturbing freedom. Clara mobilized residents, gathered volunteers to organize gifts, improvise decorations, and ensure hot food for those who couldn't get home. The party took on an even more special meaning because of the isolation. Everyone depended on each other. Marcus participated, first out of courtesy, then for something he couldn't yet name. It was impossible to remain detached from the small miracles that blossomed. A child warming themselves with a new coat, an elderly person with tears in their eyes receiving fresh bread, voices mingling in chorus in the main room. As the blizzard sealed the city, the walls of Pine Haven held not only memories of Margaret, but the echo of hope of those who still believe in new beginnings. Marcus, observing everything, felt a familiar discomfort, the unease of someone who realizes, for the first time in years, that perhaps they've stayed too long on the wrong side of history. After the last child skipped out through the snow, Leaving the inn's hallway a little lighter with hope and a little heavier with longing, Clara turned off the lights. Silence filled the lobby. In her hands, her mother's star brooch gleamed faintly in the flickering light of the fireplace. Marcus, still awake, wandered the corridors. Without planning, without calculating how his days in New York unfolded, Marcus found himself walking towards the kitchen, drawn by a magnetism he couldn't name. He found Clara there alone, heating milk in a copper pot, the steam rising like a silent dance. She turned around when she heard him come in. "Can't you sleep?" Clara asked, her voice low like a secret shared only with him. "No," Marcus replied, walking closer. "There are things that keep you awake." Clara prepared a white ceramic mug, poured the hot chocolate, and with deliberate movements approached him. When she extended the mug, their hands touched. The warmth of the porcelain was nothing compared to the heat that radiated between her fingers and his. Suspended in that contact that lasted an eternity compressed into seconds, Clara's eyes met Marcus's, deep brown against intense gray, and in that instant he understood something no corporate negotiation had ever shown him. There were women who looked with gratitude, with calculation, with fleeting interest, but Clara observed him as if she were seeing for the first time the person he truly was, not the CEO, not the conqueror, but the man who lost himself when that woman breathed nearby. It was a disarming look. It completely disarmed him. "You," Marcus began, his voice hoarse. Clara didn't answer with words. Her gaze dropped to his lips for an instant, brief enough to carry a silent confession, and then rose again, meeting his eyes in a mute question. "Do you feel this too?" Marcus's heart raced. He realized in that suspended moment that he had lived 42 years asleep without knowing it. Clara's hand still touched his, and he wished that instant would stretch on until it consumed all future lives. But the universe, in its perfect irony, came knocking at the door. "Clara, are you there?" Eleanor's voice echoed down the hallway, drawing closer. "I heard noises in the kitchen and thought that..." The contact between them dissolved like snow in the heat. Clara quickly pulled away from someone who discovers they were burning, her fingers slipping from his as if touched by fire. Marcus returned to reality, feeling the weight of the secret growing exponentially in his chest. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, observed them both with a discreet smile, the smile of someone who sees more than they should, and pretended not to notice anything. "Just warming milk for Marcus," Clara explained, her voice slightly higher pitched than usual. He couldn't sleep. Eleanor studied them both for a moment. "Insomnia is common on nights of waiting," she said gently. "Sometimes the body feels it before the mind can name it." Marcus held the mug, drank the hot chocolate that was already cooling, and felt each drop weigh like a confession. Because there, in that kitchen lit only by the light of the open refrigerator, he had experienced something that money could never buy. The truth of being desired not for what he had, but for who he was. As the last sounds of the sleeping in faded, Marcus went up to his room carrying more weight than when he had come down. The empty mug in his hands was a painful metaphor. He had tasted the best, and now had to live with the taste of falsehood. And the worst part, the truth that would keep him awake until dawn, was that he no longer wanted to be the New York man. He wanted to be the man Clara had seen in the kitchen. Vulnerable, present, genuine. But how could he confess a lie when he had already stitched together so many layers of deceit? But how could he confess to a lie when he had already stitched together so many layers of deceit? And to make matters worse, he realized he had spent 42 years with women who desired him for his bank account, for his name in business magazines, for being photographed beside him at elite events, women who smiled when he bought expensive jewelry and disappeared when he simply needed to be heard. Marcus now understood, with the painful clarity of someone who finally sees clearly, that he had been foolish, not for believing them, but for spending so much time with those who never truly saw him. Clara had seen him in just days. Clara, who didn't know who he was, had seen him more deeply than any woman in 2 decades. The early morning hours passed slowly, filled with regrets that churned like winter leaves. Marcus gazed out the window at the still falling snow and finally understood that there were 2 types of prisoners, those trapped by the storm and those trapped by their own choices. He was both. The following morning, The big day arrived. With the wind still rustling against the windows, the inn was filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and the voices of those who had arrived early to help. Eleanor handed out to-do lists. Clara piloted the kitchen as if steering her own destiny. Marcus, without knowing exactly why, noted every detail: the color of the napkins, the sound of the children running between tables, the way Clara silently touched each ingredient to ensure that everything warmed more than just stomachs. Amidst the hustle and bustle, Marcus saw, with each small crisis resolved, that Clara was much more than he thought. She wasn't just a chef, but ultimately a powerful link between the city's past and future. The more roadblocks the snow created, the closer the human bonds grew within the inn. Marcus felt he was being transformed, not by comfort, but by urgency, by what dwells in the silences of long winters, when all that remains is each other's presence. Clara, finally encouraged by their collective effort, murmured to Eleanor, "Perhaps if we endure the night, tomorrow the light will be different." Eleanor replied with the wisdom gleaned from well-lived losses, "Sometimes it is precisely in the silence between what ends and what begins that God whispers the greatest answers." The Pine Haven lobby was an open book of light and magic that Christmas Eve. Red and gold garlands hung from the old wooden beams, each ornament shimmering under the yellowish glow of the candles Eleanor had scattered across every surface. A decision that transformed the inn into something between a dream and a sanctuary. Children ran in joyful spirals between chairs, their faces still bearing the mark of wonder at receiving gifts wrapped in crepe paper and red ribbon, while adults occupied tables laden with dishes Clara had prepared for days: turkey stuffed with chestnuts, sweet potatoes with ginger syrup, honey cookies that melted in the mouth like ancient promises. But before all this happened, there was a suspended moment, that instant when the world stops spinning and simply observes. Clara descended the second-floor stairs in a deep red dress, the one Margaret had bought years ago for a special night that deserved to be celebrated. The fabric glided over her skin like water, following every curve with an intimacy that wasn't provocative, but honest, as if the dress had been made specifically for her, for that body that had carried so much weight, that now rested at the peak of beauty, that comes only after pain well lived. Marcus was standing near the fireplace when he saw her, and he stopped breathing. It was a shock, the kind of shock that rearranges the blood's chemistry, that makes the heart pound violently against the ribs, as if trying to escape the prison of a chest. The red dress was a declaration of war against her composure. Clara felt that gaze before she saw him. She felt as if he were touching her, as if his hands were tracing the line of her shoulders, descending along the curve of her back. She raised her eyes and met his. And in that second, every defense she had built up in 38 years of survival crumbled. There was something in the way Marcus looked at her that wasn't lustful, wasn't predatory. It was adoration. It was the look of someone who sees someone completely for the first time and understands that nothing will ever be the same again. Clara felt stripped bare by that gaze, not of clothes, but of masks, of pretenses, of all the walls she had built to survive. Under that intense gray spotlight, she was not just the chef who served, the daughter who had lost, the woman who hadn't been enough for her father. She was Clara. She was whole. She was desired not despite the scars, but with them, because of them, as living proof of her courage. Eleanor, watching from afar, saw the exchange of glances between the two and understood at that moment that what had begun as a casual week had transformed into something that transcended simple explanations. Marcus walked toward Clara, as if drawn by an invisible current. When he was close enough, he extended his hand. "You," he said simply, his voice low, "are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Clara trembled, not from cold, but from something that heated her from the inside out, a burning intensity that was frightening. "It's just a dress," she whispered, trying to hide again. "No," Marcus replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "It's you. It's always you." The entire community was there. Neighbors who rarely saw each other in normal times embraced like old friends. The snowstorm had created a bubble isolated from the world, and within it pulsed the authentic heart of Pine Haven, the one Margaret had created and that Clara kept alive through recipes, gestures, and a faith that no one dared question. Even the most skeptical surrendered to the warmth of that night, drinking hot chocolate and letting their defenses fall. Clara was in her element like never before. She wasn't just serving. She was dancing among the guests in her wine-red dress, touching shoulders, whispering words of comfort, adjusting napkins on the younger children. Her face shone in a way that transcended physical beauty. It was the luminosity of someone who finally sees herself being seen, being needed, being loved unconditionally. Marcus watched her every move, memorizing that image. Clara in red, Clara radiant, Clara being exactly who she should have always been, to carry with him when everything fell apart. Towards the end of the night, when most of the children had fallen asleep on the sofas in the main living room, Clara slipped into the kitchen, that space that was truly hers. Marcus found her there, organizing utensils, as if trying to prevent the night from ending. "You should rest," he said, leaning against the doorframe. Clara turned around, surprised, and her face lit up in a way that disarmed him. "You showed up?" she said simply, as if she had been waiting for him. Marcus approached, standing beside her by the counter. Her warmth radiated, comforting. "Your mother wasn't wrong, and tomorrow will be perfect because you put your heart into every detail." "You helped," Clara said softly. "You didn't need to be a guest and do this, but you hung all those garlands, carried those heavy boxes, tasted 23 versions of gingerbread cookies until I got the recipe right." Marcus smiled. 23 versions. But who's counting? Clara laughed, and the sound filled the kitchen like music. Marcus realized he would spend the rest of his life trying to make her laugh like that. "Why?" she asked, the laughter fading, replaced by something deeper. "Why did you do all this?" Marcus held her gaze. Removable. There were so many things he should say, so many truths that needed to be confessed. In that moment, with the snow falling outside and the scent of chocolate and cinnamon enveloping them, he chose the only truth that mattered, and that one truth burned within him. "Because being near you reminds me of who I wanted to be before I forgot I had a choice," he said, his voice hoarse. "You make me want to be more." He took a deep breath, the weight of the secret pressing against his chest. "Clara, I need to tell you something. There are things about me you don't know, and every day that passes without speaking eats me up inside. You deserve to know from the beginning, and I should have been brave enough to—" "Shh," she interrupted, placing her fingers on his lips. Her eyes weren't filled with fear or judgment, but with something more complex. Understanding, perhaps, or the wisdom of someone who senses something is coming and prefers to postpone the inevitable. "Not now. Tomorrow we can talk about frightening truths. But right now, in this moment, I only want this." The air between them changed. Clara felt her heart race. He raised his hand hesitantly and brushed a strand of hair away from her face, his fingers lingering on the curve of her cheek. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, "and I'll stop." Clara couldn't think straight. "I don't want you to stop," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Marcus approached slowly, giving her time to back away, but Clara didn't. Her eyes closed when his lips touched hers, gentle at first, almost reverent, as if she were something precious that could break. But then Clara leaned in for the kiss, her hand moving up to his chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath his flannel shirt. The kiss deepened. Marcus's hand slid to the nape of her neck, fingers intertwining in her hair while the other encircled her waist, pulling her closer. Clara felt herself melting against him, years of loneliness and self-defense dissolving under the heat of that moment. And he kissed her like someone apologizing, like someone whispering promises he knows he can't keep, like someone trying to memorize every second before everything crumbles. When they finally parted, they were both breathless. Marcus rested his forehead against hers, his eyes still closed as if he were memorizing every second. "Clara," he said, his voice breaking with emotion he could barely contain. "You need to know." "I know," she whispered, her finger lightly touching her lips again. "Not now. Let this be beautiful for a few more hours." Marcus nodded against her forehead, even knowing he was making a mistake. That every second of silence was a lie by omission. But at that moment, with Clara in his arms, he was cowardly enough to steal a few more hours. They stayed there, embraced in the silent kitchen while the snow continued to fall outside. Clara rested her head on his chest, listening to his heart beating strongly, feeling safer than she had felt in years. "Thank you," she whispered against his shirt. "For what reason? For reminding me what it's like to feel, for making me believe that maybe there's still someone who truly sees me." Marcus held her tighter, etching into his memory the weight of her against him, the vanilla scent in her hair, the way she fit perfectly in his arms. Because when the truth came out, he would lose this. He would lose her. And that would be exactly what he deserved. That night, for a few stolen hours, Marcus Whitfield allowed himself to simply be the man Clara saw when she looked at him. Not the ruthless CEO, not the corporate shark, but someone worthy of being loved. And the inn, a silent witness to it all, kept its secrets as one who knows that not every fairy tale ending is written on a single page. Christmas morning dawned with that kind of light that only exists after a snowstorm. Everything shone with the purity of something that had been extinguished and recreated. Clara woke up late, still in a state of grace, her whole body carrying the memory of the kiss, of the embraces. He came down the stairs with a smile that no responsibility could erase. Eleanor was at the reception desk, organizing overdue mail, the kind that had finally managed to arrive via the snow-cleared paths. Among bills, catalogs, and brochures, there was a magazine, glossy cover, photo of a man in an impeccable suit at a corporate event, headline in bold letters that cut through the air like a blade. Clara didn't look for it. She only saw it. The magazine was on the table, and Marcus's face was watching it from the cover with that corporate smile Clara had never seen before. The smile of a man who calculates, who negotiates, who wins. The relentless shark of luxury resorts closes another controversial acquisition. Pinehaven in Whitfield Resort's sights. The world stopped. Clara picked up the magazine with hands that trembled not only from the cold. She flipped through it until she found the article. Each word felt like poison. Secret negotiations. Demolishing the current structure. 150-room boutique resort. Aggressive strategy of transforming historic properties into luxury developments. There were photos. Marcus at a gala event, elegant suit next to impeccable women. Marcus in digital rendering next to plans of a modern resort, cold, generic, nothing like what Pinehaven was. But it was the side box that ruined it. The Whitfield method. Why it works. Whitfield is a master of silent negotiations. He stays at target properties for days or weeks, reveals a former partner. He observes operations, identifies financial vulnerabilities, gains the trust of employees to obtain insider information. When he finally makes the offer, he knows exactly where to press. The strategy avoids premature community resistance and allows Whitfield to structure offers that financially struggling owners cannot refuse. Clara read those lines. Gains the trust of employees to obtain privileged information. She had spoken. She had opened her heart completely, and he was there, planning, calculating, using her every word as a tool. When she turned to the last page, she found a small paragraph signed by anonymous corporate source. Whitfield is known for his emotional coldness. During negotiations, he frequently humiliates competitors in public. This report was provided by a source who witnessed such behavior personally, seeking to expose the predatory tactics of someone who poses as a gentleman. Clara understood immediately. Robert Brennan. The man Marcus had expelled, humiliating him in front of everyone. The magazine was a bomb launched to destroy everything Marcus was building there, to break the secrecy of the negotiations, to alert the community, to avenge that moment when he was publicly humiliated. The magazine fell from his hands again. Eleanor, who had discreetly moved away, returned when she heard the dry sound of the paper hitting the floor. She saw Clara standing there, motionless, her face having lost all color. "Eleanor," Clara whispered, her voice coming from a very deep, very broken place. "Did you know?" "No, dear," Eleanor replied, her voice carrying the pain of someone confirming her worst fears. "But 3 days ago I received a call from a lawyer. He represented a client interested in discussing acquisition. I scheduled a meeting for after the party." Eleanor took a deep breath. "I was considering it. Not because I want to sell, but because I don't know how much longer I can keep this going. The bank has already called me 3 times. The ground disappeared beneath Clara's feet. It was him, Clara whispered. Marcus. The lawyer was for Marcus. I didn't know, Eleanor repeated, her whole body bearing the weight of unwitting complicity. Clara felt the anger rising, that cold, cutting rage of someone who understands they've been systematically deceived. But there was also a cruel irony. Robert Brennan, the man who had humiliated her that first night, had inadvertently become her instrument of truth. Clara climbed the stairs quickly, still holding the magazine. She found Marcus on his bedroom balcony drinking coffee, gazing at the snow as if it hadn't completely destroyed everything in someone's life. Marcus Whitfield, she said, her voice so calm it was terrifying. CEO of Whitfield Resorts, the ruthless shark. He turned, and the instant his gaze met hers and he saw the magazine in her hands, everything collapsed. Clara, he began, standing up. No, she cut in, raising the magazine. Don't talk to me. Let me read. Gain the trust of employees to obtain privileged information. Is this you, Marcus? Is this your method? Her voice trembled with contained anger. When you heard me speak, when you found out this party was our last resort, were you just gathering data? Was I your privileged source? That's not how it is, Marcus replied. But his voice sounded empty, because that's exactly how it was, at least at the beginning. And Robert Brennan? Clara continued, her voice rising. You kicked him out, you shamed him, and he decided to get revenge by leaking this. He destroyed your confidentiality, Marcus. His strategy is explained here. She waved the magazine. Because you treated him like nobody else. Marcus felt each accusation as a physical blow. You kissed me knowing, Clara whispered, her voice breaking. You kissed me and whispered that I was the most beautiful thing, and it was all a lie, built on corporate deception. Clara, please. Marcus began to move forward. Don't touch me. She raised her hand. You came here as a tourist, as an innocent guest. You went into the kitchen with me, met Eleanor, helped the children, participated in the party, all while planning to destroy this. Every smile was a lie. Every touch was a strategy. The balcony door was open. The white city below seemed to bear witness to that destruction. Leave, Clara said simply. Leave this inn, and take every lie you've woven with me with you. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. There were no words. You don't understand. He finally whispered, what I felt for you. It's a lie, Clara finished. You can't truly feel for someone while you're sabotaging them, and you can't love me while you're destroying everything I love. She turned and left, leaving Marcus on the balcony with the magazine still in his hand, the photo of his corporate face staring back at him as evidence of who he really was, a man who had destroyed 2 lives with his ambitions. Clara's, directly, Robert's indirectly, by turning him into an instrument of revenge. In the kitchen, Eleanor found Clara leaning against the wall, her whole body trembling, not from cold, from betrayal. I suspected something was wrong when he arrived alone on Saturday night, Eleanor whispered, wrapping her arms around the young woman. An elegant executive man, at a small town inn on the weekend. Alone, without a plausible explanation. It didn't add up. Eleanor took a deep breath as if confessing a long-held mistake. But then the blizzard came, the roads closed, and suddenly, his presence here was justified. I thought perhaps my skepticism had been unwarranted. Eleanor stepped back enough to look Clara in the eyes. But then Christmas came, and I truly saw, that there was something real between you two. It wasn't my illusion, Clara. In the magic of those days, in the way he looked at her as she came down the stairs in red, in the way her eyes met his as if nothing else existed. That was real. The magic of Christmas opened my eyes to see what I needed to see, that not everything that seemed suspicious was a lie, that sometimes faith and love can be as real as the snow falling outside. That's why I believed. That's why I let my distrust die in silence when Christmas arrived. He practically admitted it yesterday in the kitchen, Clara whispered. He tried to tell me, and I asked him not to. I knew there was something, and I chose not to know. Eleanor wrapped Clara in her arms once more, but this time the silence between them was different. It wasn't a silence of distrust. It was a silence of shared complicity. Both had chosen to believe. Both had deceived themselves with the same illusion. Meanwhile, in a car leaving Pine Haven in the snow, Marcus finally understood that there were two kinds of loss at that moment: the loss of his career, which he wanted to abandon, and the loss of Clara, the one that would burn him forever, and no amount of money could fix that. Now comes the question that goes straight to the heart. What would you do in Clara's place? Would you forgive Marcus or banish him forever? Leave your honest answer in the comments below the video. Marcus was driving toward the bigger city, toward the airport, toward his return to New York. But it wasn't an escape. It was surrender. He called his business partner as soon as he got a cell phone signal, still trembling. The voice on the other end was first surprise, then fury. "Did you see the magazine?" the partner practically shouted. "Brennan sold all the details to that publication. It's all there. His tactics, Pine Haven, the numbers. You've become a corporate joke, Whitfield." "Yes," Marcus replied, his voice surprisingly calm. "I'm out. I'm not closing the Pine Haven purchase. I'm resigning as CEO. You can do whatever you want with my shares." "You're crazy," the partner hissed. "You're going to lose everything. 20 years of career, billions in assets. Why, because of a woman who just kicked you out?" Marcus closed his eyes, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "Because she's right about me. If I go back now, if I pretend this week didn't happen, if I resume the game, I'll prove her right forever. That there's nothing in me but ambition." "That's exactly what you are," the partner replied cruelly. "And in 3 days you'll realize you lost everything because of an illusion." Marcus hung up the phone. That night, in a generic hotel in a mid-sized city, Marcus Whitfield, billionaire, CEO, the Shark, sat down at a computer and began to liquidate 20 years of his career. He sold his shares in Whitfield Resorts, signing documents that removed him from any future decision-making. He called human resources and formally resigned. He prepared press releases explaining that he was stepping down to pursue opportunities that better aligned with his personal values, a corporate lie that no one would question. The truth was simple. He had spent 42 years building an empty empire. 3 days passed. 3 days in which Marcus, isolated in his penthouse apartment in Manhattan, that cold, modern space, devoid of a single personal memory, made the decision that would change everything again. He called Eleanor Walsh, not as Marcus Whitfield, not as the CEO, just as a man who had nothing to lose. "Eleanor," he said when she answered, "my name is Marcus Whitfield. I'm not just any guest. was CEO of Whitfield Resorts. I came to Pine Haven to negotiate the acquisition of your inn." Eleanor remained silent. In that silence, Marcus heard all the shared disappointment. "But things have changed," he continued. "And I'd like to make a different offer, not as a company, as an individual. I want to buy Pine Haven personally. And there are conditions." "What kind of conditions?" Eleanor asked cautiously. "May you keep the inn exactly as it is. May every detail that Margaret created be preserved. May the Christmas celebration continue. May the children's letters continue to be answered. May nothing be demolished, nothing be modernized. May Pine Haven remain as Margaret dreamed." "And Clara?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Clara will be the executive chef," Marcus replied, "with a fair salary, benefits, and profit sharing. Their names on the recipes, Margaret and Clara Bennett. It will be a restaurant, a space of preservation and love." Eleanor took a deep breath. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the only way I can't be exactly what Clara said I am," Marcus replied simply. "Because actions speak louder than excuses. And because some people are worth more than any amount of money or power." Eleanor was crying now, realizing that there was still hope. That there was a possibility that this lie could be transformed into truth. Not erased, but redeemed. "When are you coming back?" Eleanor asked. "Tomorrow morning, on New Year's Eve. I'll go with the lawyers with contracts already prepared. Everything ready for you to review and decide if you trust me." "Clara doesn't know I'm coming back," Marcus said. "Because I don't have the right to ask for forgiveness. I only have the right to file a lawsuit. And if she doesn't forgive me, at least the inn, her legacy, Margaret's legacy, will be safe. On the morning of the last day of the year, When the snow still fell softly on Pine Haven, Marcus was in a car, driving back to the town that had changed him. For the first time in his life, he didn't know how that story would end, because the script had slipped from his hands, and now everything depended not on calculation or strategy, but on grace, that rare and unpredictable thing that no one can negotiate or buy. And when that last day ended, a new year would begin. Perhaps for both of them. Perhaps for the first time in 42 years, Marcus Whitfield would have the chance to simply be Marcus. Marcus's absence was a void that strangely filled Pine Haven, not just with sadness, but with that peculiar kind of silence that follows an explosion. Clara spent the first few days in survival mode. She got up early, prepared food, smiled at customers, and received veiled condolences from neighbors who had read the magazine. But at night, when the inn fell asleep, Clara allowed her body to collapse against the kitchen walls. She touched the places where Marcus had been, the counter where he had made hot chocolate, the copper pot he had used, the floor where his feet had rested during that kiss that she now felt like poison in her memory. Eleanor tried to keep the routine going. The children at the party asked about the tall young man with gray eyes who had helped distribute gifts. "He's gone on a trip," Eleanor would say simply, without elaborating. In the room Marcus had occupied, that space which now seemed like a museum of a time that hadn't lasted, Eleanor found a letter left on the bed. It was addressed to Clara, but Clara still couldn't read. Eleanor kept it, knowing there would be a time for everything. Meanwhile, in Pine Haven, New York, Marcus was facing brutal pressure. His former partner hired lawyers. There were threats of lawsuits, attempts to prevent him from selling his shares, and complex legal maneuvers to regain a stake in the company. But Marcus had something his former partner didn't: immeasurable personal resources and the absolute willingness to lose everything. In 72 hours, Marcus Whitfield liquidated 20 years of his career. He sold, he resigned, he signed documents that removed him from any future corporate power. But there was one crucial exception. Instead of simply abandoning Pine Haven, he used his personal fortune, the wealth he had accumulated beyond what the company controlled, to structure a takeover bid for Eleanor. Not a corporate one. Personal. Irreversible. He worked with lawyers to prepare contracts that would protect not only the inn, but also Margaret and Eleanor's legacy. There were also plans, beautiful, non-corporate plans. A restaurant called Margaret's Kitchen, on the ground floor of the inn, where Margaret's recipes would be served as an eternal tribute. A memorial space for Clara's mother, and above all, a document declaring that no structural changes could be made without the consent of the Pine Haven community. Marcus wasn't buying property. He was redeeming himself through the action. In Pine Haven, Clara was facing her own chaos. Eleanor had admitted she was considering selling, and now, with the truth about Marcus exposed, Clara was beginning to understand that perhaps Eleanor had no choice. The bank kept calling. The bills kept piling up. One night, a week after the discovery, Clara found Eleanor sitting alone in the main room in front of the Christmas tree which now looked withered. "Eleanor," Clara whispered, "are you going to sell?" Eleanor looked at the young woman she had loved like a daughter. "I don't want to, darling. But perhaps I have no choice. Without you working for an impossible wage with no prospect of improvement." She took a deep breath. Sometimes, loving a place means letting it go to someone who can take better care of it. "No, we'll find a way. We will." "Clara," Eleanor interrupted gently, "sometimes life puts us in positions where we have no control. It's precisely in those moments that we need to trust that something greater is at work." That same night, the inn door slammed shut in the wind and a letter arrived, not through the traditional mail service, but delivered personally by a messenger. Eleanor opened it and read silently. When she finished, there were tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of something that seemed like mercy. "Clara," Eleanor called. "Come here. There's something you need to know." Clara went downstairs, fearing the worst. Eleanor handed her a formal letter, a purchase offer made personally by Marcus Whitfield, with all the aforementioned protections. "He did this?" Clara whispered, reading line by line. "Yesterday," Eleanor replied. "He called. He explained everything, and he signed this. Marcus resigned as CEO. He sold his shares. He's liquidating his entire career to buy an inn that you two love. Removable. Clara sat down, her whole body trembling. It was a wordless apology. It was an action that screamed louder than any speech of forgiveness ever could. He'll be back tomorrow, Eleanor continued. On New Year's Eve, with lawyers, with signed contracts, saying that if you don't forgive him, at least the inn will be safe. That what he can offer now is not an explanation but action. Clara looked at the letter in her hands and understood that there were two paths ahead. There was the path where she could close her eyes to all of this, maintain her anger as protection, allow the fear of being hurt again to guide her decisions. And there was the other path, the more difficult, the more frightening, where she could choose to trust in transformation, in redemption through action, in the possibility that people could change. The night passed slowly. Clara didn't sleep. She read Marcus's letter, the one Eleanor had kept, hundreds of times. In it he wrote, "Clara, I have no words that can repair what I did. Only actions. Only the hope that one day you might see that what I felt for you was true, even if everything else was a lie. That you might understand that the betrayal changed me more than any success I ever had. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only offer this. Your mother will live forever in that place. You will live forever in that place. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the grace I received when I finally understood that losing you would be losing everything that truly mattered. Marcus." On the morning of the last day of the year, exactly 1 week after the kiss in the kitchen, after the magazine arrived, after everything fell apart, the sound of a car arriving at the inn echoed through the tranquil snow. Marcus had returned, and this time, not as the man who came to destroy, but like one who returns to rebuild. Marcus got out of the car with 2 lawyers beside him, both carrying briefcases containing legal documents and the materialized promise of transformation. The snow glistened in the morning light, and Pine Haven seemed suspended between condemnation and redemption. Eleanor was on the balcony when she saw him. Her face showed no surprise, only recognition. She opened the door. "She's in the kitchen," Eleanor whispered. As always, when she needs to think. Marcus took a deep breath. Each step toward that kitchen weighed like a confession. He didn't know if he would be welcomed or thrown out. And strangely, that calmed him. Because for the first time in his life, he was willing to accept any outcome that wasn't within his control. She found Clara alone, preparing bread. That bread she made with her eyes closed, as if the recipe lived in her bones. She sensed her presence before turning around. And when she did, her face was an open book of conflicting emotions. Anger, hope, fear, confusion. "Marcus," she whispered, and his name came out like a breath that had been held. "I'm not here to apologize," Marcus said immediately, his hands open in a gesture of surrender. "Words are cheap and you deserve more than words. I come here with action. I come with honesty, at the highest price I can pay." Clara didn't answer. She just waited. "I bought Pine Haven," Marcus continued, "with my personal fortune. As an individual, not as CEO. The inn is now owned by a trust that protects every aspect that Margaret created. Every tradition, every detail, every memory of her mother will be preserved forever." "Marcus," Clara began, but he raised his hand. "Let me finish, please," he asked. "You will be executive chef, with a fair salary, with a share of the profits, with your name and your mother's name permanently associated with that place. There will be a restaurant called Margaret's Kitchen. There will be a memorial." "You ruined your career," Clara whispered, beginning to understand. "Yes," Marcus replied simply. "Because I finally understood that I had spent 42 years building an empire that meant absolutely nothing compared to the weight of a woman who truly sees me." Clara felt tears welling up, but she held them back. "You're trying to buy my forgiveness." "No," Marcus replied, and his voice was so sincere it hurt. "If it were possible to buy your forgiveness, you would have forgiven me last week. I'm here because I've come to understand that there are things that can't be bought, and you are one of them." Marcus walked closer, but stopped at a respectful distance. "I'm not asking for forgiveness now. I'm simply offering this. The opportunity for me to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of what you deserve. Just being the man you saw in that kitchen the night of the kiss. Vulnerable, present, true. Clara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't seen before. She saw the man who had lost everything, not by chance, but by deliberate choice. The letter you left, Clara whispered. Did you write it knowing I might not read it? Yes, Marcus replied. Because sometimes the most important messages are the ones we write without being sure they'll be read. Eleanor appeared in the kitchen doorway carrying 2 coffees. She placed one mug in front of Marcus and the other in front of Clara. Hot chocolate, Eleanor said. Sounds appropriate. Marcus and Clara looked at the mugs, and that first encounter in the kitchen, so full of hope, so fraught with misunderstandings, passed before them like a ghost. I can't simply forgive, Clara said finally, her voice trembling. I can't just erase everything that happened. I'm not asking for that, Marcus replied. I'm only asking for a chance. A chance for me to show through time and action that there has been real transformation. Clara took a deep breath and asked the question that really mattered. If I said no, if I said I don't want to see him again, would you sell the inn anyway? Or was this all just a disguised negotiation? Marcus blinked because the question was exactly the test he needed to pass. Yes, I'd sell it anyway, because this isn't about convincing you to forgive me. It's about doing the right thing, finally doing the right thing, even if you choose to hate me forever. At that moment, Clara understood that a real transformation had taken place. Not because Marcus had said the right words, but because he had finally stopped calculating. I need time, Clara whispered. It still hurts too much. I understand, Marcus replied. As much time as you need. But I want to understand, Clara continued, raising her eyes to meet his. I want to know if what you're saying now is true or just another well-constructed lie. Then I'll stay, Marcus replied simply. Here in Pine Haven, as a man who is learning for the first time what it means to be vulnerable, and you can watch to see if there's any real transformation. As the afternoon grew dark, and the lawyers left with the signed contracts, Clara and Marcus met again in the kitchen. This time only silence and the weight of everything that had happened. Do you believe me? Marcus finally asked, his eyes searching for hers. I'm starting to, Clara replied honestly. I see what you've done. But to believe completely, that will take time. Marcus nodded, accepting that truth. He approached slowly, without pressure, like someone who had no right to demand anything. Do you still hate me? Clara thought about the question, about its true meaning. No, she replied. I think the worst part is that I don't hate you. Because if I hated you, it would be easier. But what I felt for you has changed. What has changed? Marcus whispered. Out of compassion, Clara replied. Out of understanding that you too are human. That you too can fall, learn, grow. Her tears began to stream down her face. And that's what hurts the most, knowing that what I felt was real, and that you wasted it on lies. Marcus reached out his hand, asking silently. Clara considered it for a moment and then took it. The touch of that hand burned him, but he knew he had no right to ask for more. But Clara, finally understanding the meaning of genuine vulnerability, brought her hand to his face. Her fingers touched Marcus's jaw, tracing that face she had memorized from past kisses, now marked by scars. If I say that I still desire you, Clara whispered, does that make me weak? No, Marcus replied, his voice trembling. That makes you human. And then slowly, allowing Clara to control the pace, Marcus leaned in. His lips met hers with a tenderness that was almost an apology. It was a different kiss from the previous ones. It wasn't passionate, it wasn't desperate. It was recognition. It was confession. It was redemption through physical contact. When they parted ways, they were both trembling. I don't deserve you, Marcus whispered against her lips. No, Clara replied, opening her eyes. But I'm choosing to trust that you're learning to deserve it. Marcus kissed her again, this time not out of desire but out of gratitude. Gratitude for the opportunity to start over. Eleanor, who had discreetly returned looking for something, found Clara and Marcus embracing. Eleanor simply smiled and disappeared silently. And on that last night of the year, as the snow continued to fall on Pine Haven, Clara allowed hope to touch her heart for the first time. Not as an observer, but as someone who finally believed in a new beginning. A year had passed since that morning. Pine Haven was no longer the same, but in a way that Margaret would have approved. Marcus had kept his promise of preservation. Each renovation was done with respect for the past. The old blinds were restored, not replaced. The worn carpets were remade in the same pattern. The light fixtures were modernized while maintaining the Victorian style. And with his corporate experience, Marcus brought strategy. Intelligent digital advertising, gastronomic partnerships, efficient management. The result, the inn, which had struggled with losses, was now breathing with financial security. This year's Christmas celebration would be even bigger. Neighboring towns sent volunteers. Local businesses sponsored it. Eleanor walked through the aisles with the smile of someone who had finally rested. But the big event was the opening of the restaurant. Marcus had convinced Clara that it wasn't charity. It was smart investment. Sustainable gastronomic tourism, he had presented, figures in hand. Clara, who had learned that calculating and loving are not mutually exclusive, agreed. The negotiation had only one demand from Marcus. I choose the name. Clara was expecting something strategic. Nothing had prepared her for the plaque unveiled on the morning of the inauguration. Margaret's Kitchen, where love becomes food. Clara stopped breathing. Eleanor began to cry silently. The entire city, gathered for the event, understood in that instant that this restaurant was not just a business. It was a testament. It was redemption. You put her name there, Clara whispered. Yes, Marcus replied simply. Because your mother created this, not me. With kindness, with presence, with a refusal to give up. This is all Margaret. At the opening ceremony, with food critics, mayors of neighboring cities, and journalists, Clara cooked. She didn't give a speech. She simply cooked. In that simple act of preparing food with intention, Clara understood that she had finally made peace with the past. A week later, the review arrived, published by a renowned critic who had visited the opening incognito. Margaret's Kitchen. Redemption tastes like rosemary and cinnamon. I rarely find a restaurant that sells more than just food. It sells history, transformation, hope. Clara Bennett cooks like she's praying. Each dish is a confession. My rating is the highest, 5 stars with an open heart. Tourists began to arrive and reservations were sold out for months. A week after the opening, Marcus found Clara in the kitchen, the one who had witnessed everything. He was nervous. She knew him too well not to notice. Are you okay? Clara asked. No, Marcus replied honestly. I'm going to ask for something I should have asked for months ago, but which needed to be earned through action before words. He knelt down. Clara Bennett, you taught me that redemption is a process, that transformation is a daily choice, that there are things worth more than corporate power, and you are that thing. Will you marry me? As a man who finally understood that he was lost until he met you, he opened a small box. An antique ring, the one that had belonged to Marcus's mother. Yes, Clara whispered, because you proved, through every action, that transformation is real. And because I've changed too, from being afraid to love to having the courage to trust again. They kissed in that kitchen that had witnessed humiliation, betrayal, passionate kisses, confrontation, reconciliation, and now, a marriage proposal. The wedding was small, on the balcony of Pine Haven, under the same Christmas tree that had witnessed the kiss of that first night. Clara wore a simple dress, the white of a woman who had been reborn, who had chosen to trust again. Margaret was there, in every detail, in the rosemary and cinnamon bouquet, in the music that was playing, the one Margaret used to sing in the kitchen, in the vows that Clara and Marcus exchanged. I promise to be honest even when it's easier to lie, Marcus said, his eyes never leaving Clara's. To be vulnerable even when it's easier to calculate. To be that man you saw, imperfect but genuinely trying, every day. I promise to allow you to redeem yourself, Clara replied. To allow you to show through action that transformation is possible. Eleanor was crying in the front row. The whole town was there. People who had grown up eating Margaret's bread, who had received gifts at that Christmas party, who knew the story of redemption that was being celebrated. When God writes a Christmas story, He doesn't avoid mistakes. He transforms them into the foundation for genuine miracles. As the psalmist says, "Put your hope in the Lord, O Israel, for with the Lord is unfailing love, and with Him is full redemption." Psalm 137. And this is what happened at Pine Haven, that night at Margaret's kitchen. That grace shone in every dish, in every laugh, in every heart that had learned to love again. If this story moved you, subscribe now to help the channel reach more people. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what resonated most with you in this story. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and together we'll transform stories into real inspiration. See you in the next video, with another story that will touch your heart and remind you that redemption is always possible when there's a willingness to change. May the spirit of Christmas be with you.